Hello, and you're very welcome. I'm Sarah. I'm Artistic Director with Collective Encounters, and thank you for coming to one of our Centre for Excellence events. Some of you look very familiar, others I think are new to us today. So just for those of you who don't know, we established a Centre for Excellence in Participatory Theatre about 18 months ago now. It's largely funded through Esme Fairburn, which has been brilliant. And we host a whole range of different kinds of events. We have a library, we have publications that are all really about trying to make the best participatory theatre practice that we possibly can, and to explore with our peers and our friends and our colleagues what that means to us now in the 21st century. Marianne, who heads up our Centre for Excellence programme, I'm going to hand over to in a minute, and she's going to introduce our guest speakers for today. But as with many of our events, we will start with our panel giving some provocations and some input. There'll be the chance to ask questions from them, and then there will be an open space where you have the chance to lead on the discussions around the themes that have arisen for you and the things that you want to pursue in more detail. So I'm going to hand over to Marianne now and let her introduce our exciting guest speakers.
Great, so hello, welcome to this event today. I'm just going to share my screen, and if I can do this, present, great. So today we have our event, Putting Anti-Racism into Practice. This is a really important event, and we're really excited to have some brilliant guest speakers. And given the context of this week, we are even more excited to be having this conversation. Our calling question today for our speakers was, what role can the arts organisations and arts workers play in eradicating racism and building more inclusive communities? Now that's a big question, but we like that. We want to see where we can go with that. Today we'll be having 3 contributions. Our first speaker will be CJ. CJ is a writer, producer and social entrepreneur, at the moment working with Birmingham Rep and with his own company, the Black Pounds Project. We next have Jabida Khartoum, who is the artistic director of Blackfest, a really innovative Black and people of colour led organisation in Liverpool. And finally, we have Francisco from Luma Creations, who works with Latin American communities and is working with us on a project at the moment too. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now, if I can find that button. Great. Am I still sharing? You are. Yes. There we are. The bar has gone. Brilliant. So first of all, I would like to introduce CJ. Give us a wave, CJ. Hi. So CJ will be talking about diversifying the arts using social entrepreneurship. I'm just going to spotlight CJ so we can see him. Great. CJ, so can I hand over to you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation and for allowing me to share some of what I've been doing with you all. So I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, that's typical, isn't it? It's not up now. 1 second, sorry.
No worries. I just forgot to mention that we will be recording the first half. So if you don't want to appear in the recording, please feel free to turn your cameras off.
So assuming everybody can see this okay, yeah? So I myself, as Marianne put, I am a writer, producer, entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, director. I do quite a few things. I wear many different hats, and I think it's very important to be able to do that because I come from a community that doesn't necessarily see the arts as a viable career option. So a lot of the people and the communities that I'm working with don't have the option of necessarily just deciding, oh, I would like to go to university to study theatre or performance or anything remotely arts related. A lot of the communities that I serve and work with will have to go to university for a particular reason or pursue an apprenticeship in a different area of interest in order to be able to kind of do what they're actually passionate about on the side of that. So identifying that this was something that I had experienced, and growing up, it was something that wasn't necessarily pushed for me going into the arts, but I kind of had the resilience and rigor to just say, I'm just going to do it anyway. But I know that a lot of young people, particularly that I'm working with, don't necessarily have that opportunity. So it's about how can I now, being in a position where I am actually in the sector and in the industry in some sense, how can I now create opportunities where young people and people of color can work, but also pursue their dreams and aspirations on the side of that. So the company that I am the director of at the Birmingham Rep is called Lightpost Theatre. Now, I was actually a member of this company back in 2015, before it was actually called Lightpost Theatre. It was actually a company, it was actually a program that was funded by Mind Charity called the Up My Street Project. Now, I know that that the phrasing of that project is already problematic, but it actually was able to, in some sense, bring a lot of young men together with a common aim of, okay, it's called this project now, but what can we actually turn it into? What can it become? So I was someone who was working at that particular time. I was working as a lunchtime supervisor, or I was doing some catering in a school at that point, and I heard about this project, and I was really intrigued to continue after university, being able to pursue my career in the arts and think about a different way of getting into the industry. So when we came together, we decided that Lightpost Theatre Company was going to be formed. And since then, it's become so much more. It's become an actual, I'd say, we're bordering on kind of a amateur dramatic professional performance group at this stage. And it actually is just about bringing young Black men into a space that otherwise they wouldn't be able to have access to. Because the reality is, a lot of the projects that the theatres are running are not accessing the communities that would benefit from them. So recognizing that theme of entrepreneurship, the play Constructed was actually about bringing people in from the construction industry and actually showing that actually there are employment opportunities around this area of interest that we're exploring through this piece. So it's thinking about plays and productions that we can put on that can actually expand the horizons of these young men's periphery, and actually think about, okay, maybe that is a flexible career option, that I could do something on the side of that, and is there an area of interest within this that I can pursue? So the project was, like I say, initially funded by Mind, and it was all about strengthening the resilience of young men through theatre. And the scheme was developed in response to the fact that a lot of young Black men are overrepresented in mental health institutions and the criminal justice system. So this is a really safe space for young men to come, explain their dreams and aspirations, explore opportunities, and be able to perform and do things that they enjoy in a really safe environment. If I had a bit more time, I would share a little bit more about what we do in the actual sessions, but it is very much over to them to create the narrative that they want to portray. And then following on from that is the initiative that I set up called the Black Pounds Project. Using a similar kind of methodology, I was looking at the wider Black community. And when the whole George Floyd murder happened, I was actually looking outside of the Birmingham Rep, and you could see that that's where the protests were. So it was kind of saying, okay, well, where is the synergy here? We've got this massive arts venue, but then we've also got people saying Black Lives Matter, and we've got people from all different walks of life and communities coming together for the same common goal of wanting for there to be more equality within not just the business sector, but just as a whole. So for me, it was about how can I now piece together the way my mind works and create narratives that can actually be a springboard for young people and people of color to be able to pursue what it is that they want to do, whether that's through entrepreneurship or within the arts. How can we actually create an environment that actually does both? Because I think sometimes when we think about the arts and we think about entrepreneurship, we see them as separate entities, but particularly when we're thinking about, I'm speaking specifically about the Black community here, a lot of people will have to go down that entrepreneurial route, because a lot of the careers that would be pushed in their direction are not to be very flexible. So a lot of young people will have to kind of find something that they're passionate about, whether that's web design, graphic design, any kind of or facilitation, which we deliver training on that through Lightpost as well. But it's about creating spaces where people with the expertise can come, regardless of what community they come from, and impart their wisdom and actually share how, not just the what, but actually how people can begin to create opportunities for themselves. It's not just about looking at different funding streams. It's about how can you start to increase your value in society through what you're able to develop through the programs that we're offering. And then kind of just racing through a little bit here. Sara Park Theatrical is the other hat that I wear. I go into schools. As I mentioned, I didn't necessarily come from an arts background. I didn't have any theatre connections or anything like that. It was just purely on the basis of a lot of people telling me, first of all, that this wasn't a career option. It wasn't viable. You weren't going to be able to sustain it. There's two different ways you can go. There's the way I've gone, which is to say, okay, well, if it's not there, I'm just going to create it. And there's the other route, which unfortunately a lot of people will just say, oh, well, there isn't any opportunities or there aren't any, so I'm just not going to bother. But for me, it's about how can we open up that dialogue. So for me, growing up in school, I was very much a creative person, and I felt like if there was a program like this when I was younger, I probably would have went into the arts a little bit sooner. I would have started writing a bit sooner, or a lot sooner, because I only really started writing when I got to second year of university. That's when I realized that actually this is something that I'm quite good at. And for me, it was about how can we instill that in young children? How can we start to give them things that they can put on their CV when they get a little bit older, and for it to actually have an impact? Because I know that things like awards are really important for families to come together and recognize that, and also for the young people to have confidence. So the workshops were all about working with children who are particularly at risk of behavioral issues, or perhaps don't engage with the curriculum in the right way. It's about going into the school and saying, here's some other alternatives to what you're actually doing at the moment. So we can use your curriculum, but we will just teach it in a slightly different way that will engage a community which I feel have been overlooked within the education system by and large. So there's three different strands of work there, but there's a lot of synergy. And through creating these initiatives, it's allowed the young people that I'm working with to create their own opportunities, but also work for the organizations that I have set up. Two young guys from Lightpost are actually going to start running some sessions within the schools. And also I've been able to get a couple of interns to do social media for the Black Pounds Project. And also there's a whole mentorship scheme now. So it's just about having a vision and believing in that vision, and having a genuine desire to want to help people, and to also build your own profile so that you can help more people, because ultimately that's the reality. It's about visibility. So I've also just put a slide here with all my social media handles if anyone wants to get in touch. But I appreciate I raced through that a little bit, and there is a lot more that I could probably talk about, but for now I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Fantastic. So you can...
Thank you so much for that, CJ. It was great. Marianne, do you want to bring us back? So that's lovely. Yes. Thank you. So does anybody have questions? for CJ. We're going to do a quick question after each presenter, and then there'll be the chance for kind of collected or connected questions later. So anybody got anything for CJ? Either wave at me or put your blue hand up, or you can write it in the chat if you prefer. I'm scanning the faces. No questions for CJ. You've clearly so thorough, CJ. And Francisco has one.
I don't know if it's a question or not, because well, it is a question. Can we have a long chat later, CJ? That's the question. You know, there's so many synergies with some of the work we do and the context and the approach that you have, that it really sparks a lot of possibilities in my mind of the connections. And because for me, one of the most important things is collaborations and connecting with people and organizations that are trying to push forward an agenda that is about inclusivity and about breaking down barriers. So with a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and where you're based, and the fact that we're based in Liverpool, you know, that very much, I think one of the biggest ways in which we can move forward is by connecting and taking an active and proactive approach.
Yeah.
So, you know, especially because you're talking about the work you do with children and also the work you do with the communities, and it would be lovely to be able to connect those and look at how, you know, how we work, how you work,
yeah,
how we solve issues, how you solve issues, and that kind of thing. I think that for me, that's what stood out from your presentation, all the possibilities.
absolutely.
Thank you. And hopefully there will be that opportunity for people to connect in the open space sessions as well. You may well stumble across other people that you want to make those contacts with, which would be super. So do feel free to share your contact details with each other when you're in those breakout spaces.
Yes, absolutely. And I think throughout the presentations, make notes of the things that interest you and the things that you would like to kind of discuss further and deeper in the second half. And I think there was plenty there from CJ about aspirations and connecting and creating opportunities. So I'm just going to now introduce Jabida. Jabida is our next speaker. She is the artistic director of Blackfest, a organisation that she co-founded, and today she'll be talking, I think, a bit about Blackfest themselves, and then about unconscious bias and looking at those ideas. So thank you, Jabida.
Thank you, Marianne, for that lovely introduction. Yes, so I'm Jabida. I'm mainly a producer, director, and I co-founded Blackfest in 2018. I graduated from university, so I did, unlike CJ, I did go to university. Again, similar experience. It's not something that is advised, or it's not a career that is pushed for Black and ethnic minorities, I suppose. And it doesn't always seem like a viable profession to go into. But yes, we're here today. Blackfest was founded in 2018. The reason we founded this organization was because of the lack of representation at that particular time for Black and ethnic minorities to be seen and heard within Liverpool and institutions. There was a real lack of diversity within buildings. And this is an ongoing thing that is changing slowly. The festival itself kind of platforms community projects, it platforms so grassroots community artists, it platforms also professional theatre makers as well. So it's giving an opportunity for both community arts and arts from professionals to thrive and continue. We decided to also go for a combined arts festival, because when we came to see the talent that was in the city, in the Black and ethnic minority communities, we saw there was a lot of areas that needed improvement, which was visual arts, music, film, spoken word, theatre. Along with that, we do run projects across the year. And some of them we ran in 2019. So we only piloted in 2018. And then in 2019, we went on to doing an Empowering Women's project. not only did we empower women to write, but also they performed in the festival on our Healing Day. And healing is another practice that we look at as Black and Brown communities, and how we put self-care at the top. Obviously, seeing a lot of content online can be very, very upsetting to a lot of our audience members and participants. And self-care is something that we have always kind of practiced as an organization, and decolonial practices especially. In 2020, when we moved into 2020, obviously there was the tragic death of George Floyd. And again, like CJ has mentioned, a lot of communities wanted to have their voices heard, and they wanted to stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter. So I decided to commission a few artists that we had been working with since 2019 from diverse backgrounds to think about the term Black, just the term Black, and what that means for people. It's usually always seen as a very negative thing. But I said, let's open up our hearts, let's open up our minds, and linguistically see the term Black alongside positive narratives, and make that narrative change. So for example, I gave the prompt to our writers to think about things like soil, how seeds grow and develop in darkness, and how we need moments of darkness, and the nighttime, how sacred it is, and think about poetry, and think about writing pieces that you see Black and safe, Black and safe, Black and protection, and all those other things. I don't know if you've heard our Black Lives Matter soundscape, but it is available on SoundCloud and other kind of platforms. We've got it on our YouTube as well. We ran the digital festival as well, predominantly on Black Lives Matter. We led lots of conversations with artists on racial profiling. We had arts as protests from the visual arts segment. We had theatre as well. So we've had lots of theatre productions as well on the experiences of one of our artists who is dual heritage. And he talks about his experience of being racially profiled and being very young as a Black male, being racially profiled in Liverpool, and his experiences and his identity from being mixed, from being Jamaican and from an English background, and what that meant, the duality of those experiences. And his book is amazing, so please guys have a look at it. So yeah, I also within my practice, I'm a spoken word artist myself. Since Blackfest, I have kind of put that on hold at the moment. But yeah, I want to move on to anti-racism and what that really means as a framework to actually, sorry, I'm gonna have to move some of my things so I can actually read what I've put in here. So I've put a lot of things in here, like anti-racism and what that actually means for an organization. And it's, for those of you that don't know or want to hear a bit more, it is the systematic racism. It's racism that is overt, covert, and that is institutional sometimes, which is invisible. And it's looking at acknowledging personal privileges, confronting acts, as well as systems of racial discrimination, and working to change personal racial biases. So I'll be talking about some very uncomfortable things, just as a disclaimer. I don't think we can talk about anti-racism without putting certain things into context. And that's what we do as a platform, especially politically, and understanding those things. So yeah, we build awareness around personal and institutional privilege, access to resources, and proximity to power, especially with communities not getting access to buildings and things like that. Blackfest enable communities getting access to our institutions in Liverpool. And we led a lovely event in 2019, which was a celebration night, and we had, different levels of arts. So whether it was a choir, whether it was, a piece of poetry, whether it's a piece of comedy, sketch, we make sure that our artists have that access, and we enable that access very easily as a platform. And so that coming from a place of power, this very important, oh, what have I done? Sorry about that. And it's having the courage to also educate and inform work that is led by community and their needs. So as an organization, we look at particular feedback we get from the community, and then we lead on projects that are then kind of communicated to us. Some of the projects that we've led this year has been, I didn't include this, has been on origins of house, so music and Black contributions to music. And we're looking at dissecting each genre with an anthology at the end, and also creating music with the community, and giving that opportunity to really dive into some arts as well. The other few projects that we did was looking at the understanding of self-love. As an organization, the way in which the Black community are treated in society and the way they are seen, there is a lot of kind of internal struggles. So we decided to kind of change that narrative and look at a progressive narrative and looking at self-love and really being unapologetically in love with yourself and what you've got to offer. So that was one project we did, which was a film project, which will be out soon. And then the last project that we did was the Hip Hop Dance Project, which made Black disability arts as well. So we are looking at people who identify as being disabled. And we've been working with a lovely facilitator from Sheffield called Nathan Gearing, partnering with Rationale Arts that make arts accessible for people that identify with that identify as disabled. And that's going to be showcased in the Unity Theatre soon. So it's going to be a theatre production. And it's been such a heartwarming project to see some young people who have been throughout the project so quiet and have certain things like selective mutism. We've got different kind of disabilities that people have come with, but have grown within themselves and having really lovely dialogue with each other now. And we've really seen a real progression. And now they're also ready to go onto stage. So working with community arts in that way has been really special for us. Yeah, I'm going to move on now onto unconscious bias, guys. One thing that we do need to address within anti-racist work is, yes, we can work with different groups of people to put pieces of work together, but we also will come across within those groups different biases, and depending on the experiences people come with. So moving on to unconscious bias. So unconscious bias is usually someone who a person thinks that they're better than someone because of what they believe or what they're like. Less of someone because that person is different to them. For example, they might be of a different race, religion, or age, and this means they could make a decision influenced by false beliefs or assumptions. Sometimes it's called stereotyping. So these are some stereotyping that I've put down that you may come across or may not come across. Things like Chinese people own fish and chip shops, or Asian people are in grocery stores, or Black people are deemed dangerous and aggressive. Indian people are doctors, or Muslims are terrorists. Muslim women are oppressed. So these are unconscious biases. So if I was faced with a panel, for example, and I came onto a panel, it was an all white panel, and there's already assumptions being built, even the way I will speak and present myself. So yeah, this unconscious bias, we've all got it. We've all got different biases as well that we also have to look at within ourselves to also eradicate those biases. I also wanted to talk about proximity to whiteness. It's not, as it says here, inherently bad, but this context is very, very important in space, and understanding that we have to acknowledge that this exists within society. It is important that we work to unpick the internalized value system that places whiteness at the crux of which is good. And therefore, the Black Lives Matter soundscape we did, I wanted to change that narrative from good to being, bad to being good, because we're not looking at the term in its essence. And therefore that project started because of these kind of proximity to whiteness and thinking whiteness is good. And as an example, we look at European beauty standards, and how whiteness, and the more lighter skin you are, the more in terms of fashion and industry, you see more progression within fashion. Again, I can't talk about anti-racist work without talking about white privilege. It is a privilege in that society places from people who are other than white. And, you know, there's certain positions where socially, politically, and economically, It's rooted within colonization and imperialism. And privilege plays a big part in how societies and systems are built to still benefit those of white descent. And that still exists. I also want to talk about light skin and dark skin privilege. This has been a huge discussion during Black Lives Matter. And being visibly more Black, I feel, myself as well, I've seen it. People do have stereotypes, and therefore there's more disadvantage to being more visibly Black. And I think these are things that we have to still acknowledge if we want to be a very unapologetically practicing anti-Blackness, anti-racism. And we need to understand those degrees. And when people are coming to you and telling you about their experiences, you know, listen to that and accept those things as well. I wanted to bring this into the narrative as well, which is fragility. As an organization and a lot of institutions, there's a lot of things that we have to look at, especially some of these things when people from ethnic minorities and Black communities are sharing their experiences with institutions. It's very, very important to embody all of this, not to become defensive and that's the first thing a lot of organizations do when you give feedback. I'll give you one feedback that I gave on a poster. And I said, look, the poster does not have any, and it was targeting females between a certain age. And it was a picture of a white woman in her 50s kind of outfit. And I was like, why don't we have more ethnically diverse people within the poster? So it attracts that kind of participants. And I got this real big spiel back, and it was a lot of defensiveness, and there was not an acceptance of, thank you very much for just letting us know. And I think this organization went as far as saying to me, can you give us some posters or give us some images we can use? And I felt the fact that I've already made you aware, there's no reason to become defensive. It's just accepting it and not policing us and our expression and not being offended by what we're saying. It's just to support you to become more anti-racist and support your organizational aims to become more inclusive. And that starts with also representation and what you're putting as a forefront of your posters, people being engaged within your organization, and it's more reflective of the communities you want to engage as well. I would love to go into weaponized whiteness as well and fragility. Again, insisting on niceness and being professional is always being used as a mask to hide microaggressions, and it's a lot more weaponized. And there's a lot of shaming culture when Black and ethnic minorities speak up about their experiences, and there's a lot of insidious harm. For example, myself having been in dynamics of having white people on my team and Black people on my team, I've had a lot of insidious harm, you know, within the dynamics of being South Asian, Muslim, and my proximity to whiteness. And what I would call weaponized white fragility is those secret conversations that take place when we leave the room. When Black and brown people leave the room, there are conversations that take place that are quite weaponized, that then we have no control over what happens when we come to the office the day after. And suddenly you're greeted with silence, and something's happened and you don't know what it is, and it's very, very invisible, and you cannot see that. And you're suddenly being treated differently. And you're like, why am I being treated differently? And it's very weaponized, and it's refusal to even look at you, and they'll invalidate your experiences. There's covert aggression, covert aggression. So I really need to really, and I can provide these details to everyone as well, to really understand these dynamics between weaponized fragility and white fragility. And also looking at being very, very, not thinking about your brand, really thinking about, I want to really put my job at risk to support someone who's saying they're being, going through some issues. And it's really saying, yes, I want to support you, and putting your organization even at risk to support a Black and ethnic minority person in work. And that takes a lot of courage to do for organizations, and being an anti-racist an organization, and really embedding that within your infrastructure and policies. And again, on policies, It's about how much you enact those policies and really accept certain things that might happen within again, accepting those experiences from people of color and black people as well, and accepting those things. It's really, really important to understand where you might be becoming defensive and there's no need. It's just like, I hear you, and that's enough. Saying, I hear you, I completely understand, I apologize, and just being just be uncomfortable, just being uncomfortable and just listening, and that's very, very important. So yeah, moving on. All is not lost. Obviously, you can, and there is good allyship. Allyship can happen, but again, for myself, I do tread very, very carefully in terms of allyship. And there's two types of allyship. There's authentic allyship and there's performative allyship. And you as an organization and as an anti-racist organization, you have to understand which one you are. And that is very, very, very important. Like I said, taking risks, holding yourself to account is very, very authentic. Empathy, grief, outrage, sitting with discomfort. It's not about you. Do not personalize it. So if people are saying, or referring, generalizing as whiteness or white people, do not take it as a personal attack. It's not about you. And no virtue signaling and taking really real action, and committed to anti-racist work and continue to work and listen to communities and listen, and examining your own privilege is one that is very, very hard for people to do, is to look at where am I in society and where are my privileges, and actually asking those questions. Where do I belong in society? I think that is so important. And I think very, very few people within communities do not ask that, especially within the white community. When was the last time you even asked yourself, where do I belong? What privileges do I have? And brand is no concern. Like I said, helping an organization get access to your buildings, giving unlimited resources, and supporting them wherever is really, really key. Also, equity, making sure that you get equity. I will not go into things without equity anymore with our institutions. I love free space. I love all those other things. But again, these are performative stuff. No bandwagoning, PR, brand, you're resentful, everyone's doing it, so I have to. So, like certain things will come up, certain statements will come up. We saw the Black Lives Matter boxes, now it's all gone, where it's become, that's a performative act, centering yourself is still performative. And virtue signaling again, and optics, and how you're benefiting. You have to look at where the benefits are going and who you're actually benefiting as well. So make your allyship very, very authentic, and holding yourself accountable is another one that is very, very important as an institution. And I think as an anti-racist organization is something that we have to practice on a daily. Moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about cultural appropriation and even my own experience recently. I went into a cafe recently, and they were talking about Marcus Rashford, telling me, oh my God, this is horrible. No, we love all cultures. And then the conversation turned to, oh my God, there's this person I know who does yoga and they're great. And they were showing me all these pictures. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. But the person that was actually practicing yoga was a person not from Indian descent. If anybody understands colonization and knows a bit of history about India, you'll know within Indian society at the time of colonization, yoga was not allowed to be practiced. And it was actually banned. So now it's about for Black and brown communities to reclaim those practices that is theirs, and really benefiting from those practices themselves. And you've got to really see how much cultural appropriation are you doing. So here, what I've seen here is understanding, for example, if even within the Black community, a hairstyle, how hairstyles are adopted within fashion and everywhere. And when you look at the proximity of power and who is actually benefiting, the culture is repackaged and shaped to benefit people in power and not benefiting the community it belongs to. And the community themselves are ostracized about having those traditions themselves. So for a young child to go into school and have a certain hairstyle has been ostracized for a long time now. but then fashion models are benefiting from this culture. And a lot of people do not understand cultural appropriation. And I felt as an anti-racist organization, it's to understand these little nuances as well about cultural appropriation. There was a massive thing where Emma Dabiri had to explain why Adele in the carnival, when she went out with her dreads, and why that was really, really not the right thing to do at the time. And she had to explain this proximity to power, not benefiting the community it actually belongs to, and how the culture is not being respected, and understanding how that can impact on communities, really being sensitive to those things. Moving on, I wanted to talk about intersections. Intersections are a very, very important thing to think about when we're looking at anti-racism.
Sorry, Jabida, can I just say we're running way over. It's so interesting and it's so useful what you're telling us, and I'm really hoping that you'll share the slides as well. But if you could possibly just whiz a little bit through this last section.
That's fine. I'm only on the last three slides.
It's just brilliant though. Thank you so much. Carry on.
So basically, intersections, very important to look at intersections and how someone can be much more disadvantaged than yourself. For example, I take myself as an example. I'm Bangladeshi Muslim woman. I'm a hijabi woman, which brings so much marginalization when it comes to people behaving with me, how they behave with me, the microaggressive nature, even taking any advice from me. All these things in terms of leadership have contributed a lot of things, because there's already this assumption on you. I'm supposed to be somewhere in a corner, oppressed. So, you know, I've put here being Black, Muslim and female. I've been looking at gender, Black, Muslim and male and gay, you know, Black and trans. All of these things you have to look at as an anti-racist organization, and look at all of those intersections and make sure that is very, very important that we look at. We're incorporating and creating an inclusive practice that has all of those voices there. And it is really that inclusive and unapologetic. Lastly, dialogue and conversation. I can't rate this big enough. Like, it's really important to have dialogue and conversations and places where you can network. We did a Springboard Zoom with a white-led organizations to bridge the gap. Again, it was initiated by us, Black First, for networking and opportunities, and enable artists to collaborate going forward and break those bridges and work more collaboratively together. Keep open dialogue with these institutions, hold space with honesty and integrity. And as I said before, have the courage to listen and be uncomfortable. Hold yourself to account. And it's not the job of Black and brown people to educate. There are plenty of books you can read as starting points, to name a few. Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. Renee, Edo Lodge. Akala Natives. We've got Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk. We've got Bernardine Evaristo, talks about gender, girl, woman, and other. And we've got Toni Morrison, The Bluest Eye. And Warsan Shire, Warsan Shire, Our Men Do Not Belong to Us, Emma Dabiri, What White People Can Do Next. I think it's very important to also educate yourselves and get those things within your libraries and educate yourselves as well. And that's another way to be an authentic ally, because it can be very draining for Black and brown communities to constantly talk about racism and constantly. And therefore we piloted a retreat this year to give that much needed safe space and time for decolonial practice, where we are looking at certain practices and walking in the footsteps of our ancestors and really reclaiming certain traditions and self-care, and owning even as something as simple as a name, and through breathwork, owning my name. You know, I'm Jabida, not Jabeda, Ada, I'm Jabida, you know? It's even owning something as minute and small as that. Yeah, so that's me. Please do follow Black Fest and the work we do. Our digital festival, our festival this year, the dates 20th to the 26th, and our celebration event, which is a community event, again, will be held at the Philharmonic Hall, and that's the 9th of October. So it will give a lot of voices to communities and artists alike.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Marianne.
Great. Jabida, could you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was so fantastic. That was such a kind of full presentation. Thank you so much for that. It certainly gave me a lot to think of lots of different things that we can talk about in the second half, from looking at the intricacies of linguistics and language and and proximity to power, I thought was a really important thing to tackle, and this idea of redressing stereotypes and finding strategies to embrace our own identities is something that we all work to do with our participants and can be entrenched more in the work that we do. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Francisco now, and we're going to take any questions at the end of Francisco's presentation.
Hello, everybody. I'm trying to decide how to follow that for two reasons. One of them is because I don't really want to repeat because it was said very clearly, and Jupiter and I, we've had many conversations, so we know each other well, and so I'm going to look at a different kind of, I was going to do a presentation that's going to cover a number of points, but I don't see the point in covering those points. So I'm going to just talk about the organization, the work we do, why we do it, and the context in which we do it, to connect to a lot of the things that have been said already. First of all, I'm Chilean. That means, and my heritage includes Mapuche, which is the indigenous people of the south of Chile, North African, Iberian, and Arabic. I have been called many things, which don't really matter, but the most important thing is that it doesn't really matter because I choose my own, you know, I stand by who I am, and I have no issues with that. And I deal in situations which are sometimes dangerous and which are sometimes isolating, but that's okay. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because one of the most important things that I come across the board is that we still are working within a context and living within a context that is Western. And it has Western attitudes and Western's way of looking at things. And this is across the board. This is not a color thing. This is a societal thing. And we make those same mistakes. So as I talk about the organization called Luma Creations, I start by the name Luma. Luma is a Mapuche name. Mapuche are the indigenous people of the south of Chile and Argentina. And Luma is the name of a tree, which is very inspirational. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because to understand how we work, when we decided to change the name, you would think that maybe I or somebody from my background within the organization would have come up with that name. But it was actually one of our colleagues, Maya Mitter, who's from India, who found the name. And we jumped on it because it means it's like a tree of life. It's a very special tree. It's a sacred tree. But on the other side of it, Luma is the wood that the police in Chile use for their batons. And it's seen as a very negative thing as well. So it's about reclaiming those things. That's why I wanted Luma. Now, we as an organization work across the board. We both collaborate and work with people from all over the world. We have been known to be called the United Nations and all kinds of other things because we have within our team, from volunteers through to staff, through to associate artists and through to the board, we have people who are from Zimbabwe, from India, from Iraq, from Chile, from Mexico, from Brazil, from Jamaica, etc., from the UK, etc., etc., etc. And that's very important to us because of the work we do. So I'm going to just share a little bit, a couple of slides, if I can find them. Yes, there they are. I think that's the one. Right. So Luma Creations is an organization that works within the context of Latin American and diversity artists and arts. And we say that very specifically because we look at ways in which we work that are connected to the way we move in the context of a global So when we talk about anti-racism, we understand that anti-racism is not a Western thing. It is not just about the UK or America, though that tends to be in this country the main thing people look at and worry about and talk about and care about. So from our point of view, our anti-racism approach works across the different countries and the different contexts that we work within. So when we do the work we do and the work we work with communities, we work with a whole range of communities in a whole range of ways. And our approach looks at a number of things that are based around that, whether it's social isolation, whether it's direct racism, or whether it's a combination of all those things. But the most important thing for us is giving people a voice. So, you know, when Jupiter was talking about people, if you really want to work within an anti-racist context, often the most important thing you can do is listen and take on board what people say and not try and explain it. One of the biggest points that we come across often is when we talk about racism, people talk about diversity. They're not the same thing. They're very different things. Racism is a very specific thing, and often gets, when that conversation started, it gets diluted. Just like, and it's because as human beings, we try to find a way in which we can connect to these things. Just like when we talk about homophobia, or when we talk about sexism, and when we talk, they have their own needs. There are similarities, but they have their own needs, and we have to look at them specifically and give them the respect it deserves. So when you talk about, and because today it's about racism and anti-racism, and it's whether you are a non-racist or an anti-racist, which are very, very different things. So for us, it's about breaking those barriers. And again, one of the comments that has come across a lot is to do with language, the context of language. We believe very much that that's one of the biggest tools that people use to keep people in their little boxes, keep people in their sections, so that they don't have, and often, I mean, one of the best things, and everybody knows this, is that funders talk in a certain way. When we talk about applying for funding, looking for funding, and not getting funding and getting rejected, often is to do because we're not quite clear about what we should be writing, how we should be explaining and creating things, and the language we should be using. You know, that comes across the whole thing. And often there is a conversation that's had to keep people out. And within the racism context, that's done very often. I have sat in so many steering groups, committees, projects, programs, as a consultant, or as a, you know, I'm a little older than Jupiter. Well, I'm a lot older than Jupiter, but that's about my age, not hers. But you know, I remember sitting in projects where we talked about where I was invited to, for example, international a national street arts conference, which was street arts, carnival, and circus art. And arriving there, and for the whole 3 days, they was all lovely talking about stuff. This was in Brighton. This was in Brighton, which is very close to London. London has the biggest carnivals in Europe, and yet apart from myself, who's from Chile and has my own, the only other person of color, say, who's black, was a guy called Pax, who is from Zimbabwe, and at the time he was an arts council officer. So throughout the project, nothing happened. And when I stood up and said, right at the end of the plenary, I asked the question, where are all the black people? They said, oh, Pax, do you want to answer that? Pax was sitting in the audience, the only black person in the whole audience. You know, we're talking about 150 people there. And the panel asked him to answer that question. Obviously, he said, I'm sorry, I'm here as an arts council officer. Don't get me involved. Because he wanted to pass that, you do it. And they, and all they came up with at the end was asking me if I had any contacts. So that's a very, that's a point that's very kind of extreme in the sense that those things don't happen like that anymore, but they do happen, you know. And having to sit there and wonder what's going on, because you know that context of, if you have somebody in there from a different background, somebody, a black person in a committee, regardless of what they know, one of the things they bring is a different perspective and different understanding, a different background, a different history, a different context, and therefore something that is worth at least as much as whoever else is an expert in a particular type of consultancy. That's and we look at those things. Now with Luma Creations, our most important thing is to work within a context of accessing people, prioritizing, pushing forward, finding ways, solutions. You know, the number of times I've spoken to organizations and said to them, you know, have those conversations with them. And often they say to me, well, we tried, we put it out, we wanted people to apply, but they didn't apply. So it's passing the excuse and passing the responsibility to the people that didn't apply. It is not their responsibility. It is the organization's responsibility to find a way. And if you don't, then you failed. You haven't found a way. That is not an excuse. There are people out there of all backgrounds, of all colors, of all contexts, who have skills. And if you don't find that way, then bring somebody in. And if you're going to bring somebody in with the skills to be able to connect that, treat them with respect, with the same respect you would treat somebody who comes in to do a consultancy about writing a business plan for your organization, and pay them with respect, because that's another issue. I mean, the number of times I've been asked to come in and say, oh, could you give us a hand with this? And I just go, hold on. What do you mean? Explain to me what you want me to do. And this is not about demanding money, but because some organizations will have it and some don't. For me, the important thing is, where do you value me in the context to everybody else that you're valuing? Where do you value that person that you're bringing in? Because often when you talk about people of color, black people, etc., is organizations put it in the context of community, so that they lower the value. Whilst when you're talking about people who are doing projects, are coming in to do a consultancy or an evaluation or a feedback, you put them in a certain level. You need to decide what your priorities are as an organization and move forward in that way. And that's really important. You know, for us, we are about breaking down barriers of racism. We are about diversity. We are about healing. We are about giving people a voice. And by that is giving them the tools to be able to stand up and have that voice. And that's really important. It's about giving people the chance to believe in themselves, and also the chance to fail without judgment. So we share that and we work together, and we don't presume that we know better, because we don't. You know, one of the most important things for me throughout my work is, I do certain things in a certain way. They're not better or worse, they're the way I do them. And different people do things in certain ways. I mean, we know this because, you know, working in the arts, there's a lot of artistic directors who say, oh no, they just want to be, you know, they're really control freak because it needs to be perfect. And I says, no, they're often control freaks because they have an issue with their own sense of belief in themselves. It's not my problem, it's theirs. Now, the problem is that that's where the power lies. And it comes back to that. So if you want to talk about being anti-racist, sorry, I don't know how that happened. Did you see that? I'll come back to that in a second. But if you want to talk about anti-racist, it's about doing your own, you know, it's a number of the things that Jupiter was talking about and CJ was talking about. It's about doing your own research. Stop asking me how you can solve the problems. Come and have that conversation with me when you've done some research, when you've got some knowledge behind it, not just, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I get that all the time. Be courageous. It's a journey, it's a learning path, and we can all do that. We are all on a learning path. We're all journeying, and we're all learning different things. This is something you've got to learn. I've got my own things I need to learn, you know. And from a point of view of me being somebody who's in charge of an organization, being a man, I have plenty to learn around how to support women, around how to support a whole range of things. So I have my own things to learn. I don't need to be doing that. I've got my own things that I have to take responsibility for, and we all have that. So that's one thing you need to take responsibility on. You know, when you talk about being an ally and supporting, being an ally has lots of different things. One of the things I always say to people, look, if you want to be an ally and you want to support, one of the things you can do, if you can, is provide financial support. If you're gonna give, you know, even if it's 50p a month to an organization that's doing that work, and learn and connect with them and support them. One of the other things is, how do you teach young people, how do you teach children, say, to be anti-racist? Because we all fall back on that thing is, I am not that, that's not me. It's not just about you, it's about the whole community and how you break those barriers down. You know,
Francisco, can I just interrupt you 1 minute and just ask you if you could start trying to wrap up? It's wonderful what you're telling us, but again, we're just running a little bit over time. So if you could,
okay,
last couple of minutes, great.
I've only got 40 minutes to go. Don't worry.
Brilliant.
I'm just going to go through. No, I'm just going to say a couple of things. I mean, just quickly, I'll put this on, but you know, we're a cultural organization that believe in the power of diversity. And we carry that in all flames. We work consistently. We work in a whole range. And one of the most important things that I always say to people, look, Black people, people of color, whatever you know, the new term is at the moment, we are not just about race. We worry about everything. We worry about the environment. We worry about how the hell we're going to get our kids educated. How are we going to do this? We worry about housing. We worry about buildings. We worry about carbon zero Britain. We worry about football. So don't just put us in that box. We have a lot more knowledge than that and a lot more to give. And, you know, I could go through all this, you know, like I said before about, so these are just examples of some of the work we do. It's about creating voices. But most importantly, you know, I have conversations. I work a lot with artists from the Southern Hemisphere, whether South African, whether they're Zimbabwean, whether they're Brazilian, whether they're Indian, whatever. And we have a different approach. We don't just subscribe to the Western approach of solving problems or living our lives. And the way we connect is very much about, I'll finish off with the context of the Xhosa nation, which is a South African nation, which talks about Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. And it's about that at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francisco. That was really inspiring and insightful. Excellent. I think we will just take a little bit. Oh, hello. Shall we do that? We'll just take some time to take some questions now for both Jabida and for Francisco, and then we'll. Sorry.
And for CJ.
And CJ as well, of course. If people have more questions come up for CJ, we'll do that as well. And then we'll take a short break and we will adjust our timings, but we'll make sure that we still get a good half an hour in the open space rooms. Thank you so much for that. We did have a question already, which I'm keen to go to first, just because it's there in the chat and it's been lingering for a while. So it's a question for Jabida, and it's from Diane, and she was interested for you to just give us a sense of what a courageous anti-racist act might look like. You spoke about that in your presentation, and I think Diane is keen that we have a kind of shared understanding around language. So she was wondering if you could elaborate on that, Jabida.
I mean, look, I am in a lot of rooms and a lot of spaces that, like Francisco also touched on, is being the only person of color in the room, being the only person that has to talk about diversity, or what experiences you have. And I am a completely honest person, and I think that act, it takes a lot of courage to be honest. It takes a lot of courage. I've talked about white fragility, and I don't think it's been picked up on. Instead, it's been picked up on proximity to power. And I think that we do need to look at our systems and our institutions, and we need to keep being unapologetically reminding our institutions how white their space is, and how can a community come into your space if you're so white and you keep giving jobs to your friends. I have said this quite outright, right, in a very radical format to a lot of our councillors, Steve Rotherham, a lot of people, and I feel that is so, it's a courageous thing to do, because a lot of people will not speak like me. Because a lot of people will not outrightly, directly kind of just say those things, and just say, I felt you should have done X, Y, Z. But I suppose that can also be a kind of counterproductive, because you're not in power. I am still not in power. People that are in power are still a certain race. So sometimes it takes a lot of bravery to even confront and talk about these issues, especially when we look at the frameworks of Liverpool being, obviously, when we look at the transatlantic slave trade. I'm also a judge on and I'm going there soon, in the Canning Docks. And I was told to give some feedback about the waterfront and why our Black and brown communities are not accessing that. And I specifically spoke to National Museums of Liverpool, and I said, well, there's no vendors, just as something that's very simple, food. Food does drive Black and brown communities to certain spaces. And if I don't see someone representing me or representing kind of food that is like me, I mean, I know you can have candy floss and sausages and all that, but that's not always our diet. And a lot of people are going vegan. So I felt the waterfront itself is just not representative of the people that were pulled into those ports. All those miserable, I mean, I don't want to talk about the horrific violence of the empire, but and the other thing as well, when this whole thing was happening, the architects came and they gave their presentations. It was amazing. Lawrence did a massive talk on transatlantic slave trade and Liverpool's part in slavery. And these guys were from London, Birmingham, and different areas, and they were not ready. And they were black and brown architects. Hearing that really hit them really hard emotionally. And they realized it has to be an emotional response. But then I saw a lot of them looking into the docks, really lost and really upset. No one thought about aftercare. No one thought about letting them know to look after themselves when they went home, and really, take that out of their system. So we had lots of conversations, and I spent a lot of time with the architects above my time. And these acts, these things matter, and self-care matters. For me now, our practice is going towards decolonial practices. We want to enable our artists to just live, be, and like Francisco said, race is not the only thing that defines us. There's other things. We might want to learn the guitar. We might want to learn the piano. We might want to, we might want to do other things with our lives. Even with script writing within Blackfest, I've said, create a comic book character. Why do you have to write about race? Why do you have to constantly write about race? And this is not what our platform's about always. But yes, freedom of expression is also important. And I do understand that it's, when you're coming from a young perspective as well, certain experiences are still new for you and you want to write about it. But I also don't want to perpetuate those narratives constantly, because that's all we're seeing in the media. And how do we change that narrative? Where do we go when we actually accept Black and brown people for their aspirations and who they really are as people? I had some of my colleagues, I was on an artistic director leadership program as well. And one of the artists had a job at GMTV, and they said something about R&B, and said, I've never listened to R&B. I grew up in the, listening to, U2 and Boyzone. And it's just this assumption that, Black and brown people only listen to their own hip hop or things like that. So it takes a lot of bravery to then confront leaders and really just be honest. It's hard to do that.
Thank you. That's a brilliant answer. We've got another question in from Elaine. And if anybody else has a last question before we take a break, pop it in the chat or pop your hand up so I can see. But while we're waiting for anything else to come in, Elaine has a question that is for any of the panel who'd like to take it, any of the three of you. And she is wondering what we can do to impress upon younger people that organisations out there are reaching out to diverse young people and offering roles, but how we can encourage those young people to take up those roles. And Elaine particularly works at LJMU in the School of Art and Design, and she recently promoted a Blackfest ad for a board member to the students, but the students didn't feel able to take that up. So is there anything else we can be doing to encourage young people from diverse backgrounds, is what's been asked here.
I just wanted to just pick up on that. One of my board members is actually a student, and he's just completed his degree this recently. So we're very happy and open to give as much information and, you know, free sharing information as to governance, boards, all of that. I'm very, very open. I mean, even yesterday, I gave some information to a young DJ collective, women, how to kind of monetize their work now and really become an enterprise. And I do that very, very privately. And I do that with a lot of artists. I even share documents of Blackfest and things like that. But me as a board, we've had, you know, people so in 2020, we had a person from the LGBTQI community. We had proper representation, and then we had a lovely, you know, more wiser than myself. I don't want to use the term older, but we had different age levels, is what I'm saying. And we should encourage young people to definitely join boards and definitely understand what it is to enact a mission, enact a company's vision. And it's really important for them to see the different processes, because even as artists, it's not just about performing. It's more than that. You have to look at the accounts. You've got to look at the tax, corporation tax, and all the extra things. I mean, myself, I started Blackfest as an artist. I did not start it as a businesswoman, but my background is in business administration. I've got a level 3, and then I went into finance. I have a lot of different range of skills in admin as well. But it's saying you can. It's saying to young people they can, really, honestly.
Thank you. Francisco or CJ, do you have anything there?
Yeah.
I'll let Francisco go first if you want.
No, you go first, CJ. It's all right.
Yeah, for me, I think my approach is slightly different. I agree with everything that's been said, but for me, I'm kind of sick and tired of the narrative of trying to get into the mind of a Black person or a person of color. You know, through my organizations, it's I pride myself in creating safe spaces for people that are white to be able to voice their own. I need to get into your mind, because the reality is, for us, we're just doing what we need to do. It's about survival. It's about, you know, putting content and work out there in the way we know how to. If you're struggling to engage us in your spaces, why do you think that is? And that's the conversation that's not being had, because it feels that a lot of white people are scared to articulate their views. So how do we move forward if people aren't going to, you know, we create these safe spaces, but it's still the people of color who are facilitating the discussions, but we're not actually in the positions to do anything to change it. So the reality is, and I think unless we create a safe space where we facilitate and you voice what you think is going wrong, that, you know, that question about how can we impress younger people? Well, how do you think you can do that? You know, and I'm not saying that in any way to be pedantic, but that's the reality of the situation. We've given you all we can give. We're doing the work that we can do to help our communities without any resources, without any of the funding, without any of the criteria that you subscribe to. So you tell us what more you need to do, and then we can feed into that, because I think that we need to change this whole narrative and this victimhood mindset. You know, we are a people that have been marginalized, and we've been pushed to the side for centuries. and we are still continuing to push forward, and we're still creating, and we're still, you know, it's naturally within us to do these things. So when you say they're not coming, why do you think that is? And I think deep down we all know the answers. So
Thanks, CJ. That's
Yeah,
really helpful
I-
and absolutely spot on. Francisco.
I agree completely.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely, CJ. I mean, from my point of view, you know, I said it in my presentation about it, you know, often when people talk about, oh, we've tried, it is really being honest with yourself. What do you mean by that? What have you actually done? Have you, when you talk about proactivity, what do you mean by that? Have you tried within your context, within your understanding, within your Western approach, even, and you know, because this isn't just about, you know, when you talk about young people, this isn't just about Black young people. Young people, if you put out a piece of publicity, a leaflet or something saying we're looking for, you might get those who have been learning how to do it the right way, but who is it you're after? Because this happens a lot in the context. Or have you, you know, when you write something, when you create something, when you put something forward, when you try to approach people, when you try to connect with people, what is it you're doing, and how is it that you're doing it? Are you doing it on your terms, or are you doing it on their terms? You know, are you understanding where they're coming from, or are you just saying, you know, we want you here, but on our terms, which is usually the case? You need to create a situation, and you need to learn, and you need to bring, if you're going to bring people like CJ, like Jupiter, like me, like whatever, like whoever, this, and I'm sure I can see a number of faces here that I also know have those skills, very much so, then bring them in as the experts that they are, and respect them as the experts that they are. If you want them to do that work, they're not just being a community engagement worker, they're a consultant, and they have a series of skills that you do not have. And they have a series of an understanding that you do not have. So if you want that kind of situation, then that is because, I mean, like CJ said, we are going to carry on doing what we do regardless. And we're going to carry on moving forward, whether you agree with us, whether you support us, or whether you're not, because we know that our communities need us to be strong. And we know that we have people in the community who are incredible at so many things. And we can access those people because we have that understanding, and we have that journey. We have that, you know, that we've taken that path, and we've done the learning, and we are part of that community in that way. So if you want people to get involved, and for me, you know, giving people the power to be able to make those decisions, it's so important for us to move forward in this, in a place we find ourselves in now. And we need to give those people the additional skills so that they can take on the challenges that are coming thick and fast and are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're not just race challenges, you know, they're all kinds of challenges. And we need to be able to ensure that our communities and our young people have those skills. And it's our responsibility to do that.
Thank you. They're brilliant answers from all three of you. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions at the moment. I'm sure that a lot of these issues will get picked up in the open space conversations coming up. I'm going to hand over to Marianne, who's going to set that up, and then I promise we're going to take a short break. Thank you so much to our brilliant panelists for their contributions. It's been absolutely fabulous. Thank you. Really insightful.
Yeah, and to echo Sarah's words, thank you so much for coming and contributing and sharing your expertise and your experiences today. I think taking that idea of responsibility forwards, we now want to open the discussion to us all, and that idea of it's not just on the shoulders of people of colour to carry this conversation, it's about us all being part of a discussion. I'm just going to share my screen. So from here, We will next go into an open space discussion. You can see on the left is our calling question, and we would invite you to take the ideas you've heard from our amazing speakers today forward into this. So what we'll do next is we will name the rooms and we will decide an agenda together going forwards. I'll go on to the next slide. So there aren't really any rules for open space apart from the law of 2 feet, which means when we open the breakout rooms, there will be different discussions in each room. Don't feel like you have to stay in that discussion. You are free to move around discussions as you please. And we have the bumblebee and the butterfly analogy. So the bumblebee is someone who buzzes around and cross-pollinates discussion, and the butterfly opens their wings and sits back and takes it all in. Just to go back, we also have the triad of speaker, listener, witness. Everybody is active in the discussion, whether you're speaking or not. So please be there to listen, support, and witness the discussion. So the final bit will be entering the Zoom room discussion topics. So to do that, I'm just going to stop sharing and copy the link. So into the chat here, I'm just going to do that here. So you should be able to open this document, and on that document, on slide 4, there is, you can see here, a table. If you would like to call a discussion topic, please put your name on the left-hand side in the column, and you can see an example of a short topic title on the right-hand side. We're going to take a break now, and over the break, we would like to invite you to populate this agenda, and after the break, we will open the breakout rooms so you can move around them to have discussions based on what you have heard from our wonderful panelists.
And Marianne, can people add additional lines, or are there only the 4 rooms that we're wanting
No,
to...
you can add additional lines. So this document is completely editable by all. So let me see if I can show you how to add an additional line. So to do that, you would just, I think you just highlight it and insert row below. So there can be as many topics as we like for today. And also, if anyone is accessing the live transcription and needs that to fully participate in today's discussions, we will also be making the main space a discussion room so that we can continue using the live transcriptions here. Okay.
Thank you. So you have that link now, so you can go on to the open space spreadsheet during your comfort break, but we're just going to take a really quick, I think, how long do you want to take, Marianne? Should we go for like 7 or 8 minutes?
Yeah.
That'll take us through to 25 to 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Quick
Okay.
comfort break, and thanks again to everybody who's contributed. It's been fabulous.